Hey everyone, and welcome back to Tech and Real Estate. I'm your host, Ariel, and today we're joined by Rohan, a real estate pro with a fascinating journey. From starting out in student housing near USC to building a portfolio in multifamily properties across the Midwest, Rohan has navigated various market cycles and challenges. We'll dive into his transition from corporate to real estate, how he scaled up through creative deal making, and the lessons he's learned along the way. Let's jump right in and get started. Hey, Rohan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ariel. Good to see you. Good to talk again.
Yeah, great to see you as well. First time we spoke, love to hear about your background. And I'm glad that we have now the platform to do so everyone could hear from your journey from student housing to also going into multifamily and more. So, with that, would love to start off a little bit before all of it. And what was your background and how did you actually get into real estate?
Yeah, so I went to USC in Los Angeles in the late '90s. This was a dot-com era. Things were, Yahoo and all sorts of companies were making headlines on a daily basis. IPOing, most of them without, I would say, good revenue models. And so when I graduated in 2000, just before I graduated, a company I was going to work for was actually sponsored by Ross Perot. It was called EDS, and they EDS was going to give this company like $20 million, $20 to $30 to like start this platform in Asia that would like basically rival Yahoo today, or Yahoo back then, which was I think more powerful platform. Anyways, March 2000 happened. The world blew up. Internet companies started like, it was one of those things where, the tide went out and it was really apparent who was naked, and revenue models started to matter a lot more. And so very quickly, many companies, including the one I was at that point working for, our funding went from $30 million to basically $2 million overnight. And I also came to my own sort of crossroads in life that, I'm okay at this tech job. I can kind of do it. I can kind of like, be a business development person, but it's not really what I think is maybe not my calling per se, but something I'm never going to be that great at. I'm not a great programmer or something. I'm always going to have to be like, I don't know about faking it, but doing like extra stuff to get to like it to just kind of keep up as opposed to actually like succeeding. And so I think, the timing as well with like internet at that point being kind of down. I got with a buddy and we started taking friends and family money and started buying really just rental housing by USC, University of Southern California, Los Angeles. At the time, this is 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002. LA was a, much different place. And USC specifically was in a neighborhood that was, much more rough. It hadn't really gentrified that much. There was still a lot of concerns about safety. And we just kind of hit that market really well. And we started buying these housing and we started making them really student friendly. So working on, cool aesthetics, making them really safe. They're pedestrian to the school. And that was our basic model. And we just kept doing that over and over again. At the time, we're thinking barely mid 2000s, the ability to get capital was actually really easy. Things like stated income, no doc, things like that were very easy. And we were playing right in that space. So we were buying, smaller properties, we're quickly renovating them. We'd refi it and go buy the next one. And so we actually ended up taking very little outside capital. And over a period of 8 years, we amassed about 400 beds in that little area. And which was great, except, we were like, I think we were really good at the acquisitions and renovation part. The management part was like not our forte and not something we really loved doing. And so we brought in management people to help us run it. And then subsequently, 08, 09, you entered the GFC, all real estate started slowing down. And we felt like, at least I felt like there was enough management power there that our portfolio would be taken care of. We kept growing it through those years, but I started kind of shifting more into market rate housing and start buying, really distressed stuff in the Midwest. So Texas, Oklahoma, and continue that for like another 10 years, basically, 10, 12 years from like 2010 to really in the last, it's only a year or two I haven't bought a multifamily deal. So a lot of multifamily, a lot of value add. And yeah, that was, so I got with another guy, wanted to start raising outside equity, create Good Life Housing Partners, which you see in the back. And the idea was that we would have this platform for investors who are looking to get, substantial returns in by investing in real estate, and really through market rate multifamily, through student housing, and eventually we even started doing multi-tenant industrial. So this is kind of how the platform was created, and we've done, well over $500 million on that platform.
Wow, incredible. I mean, you come out of school, you think you have this path that's kind of all set. Then, economics kind of change. And now then you pivot with a partner and you not only just buy one, two, three rentals, you're actually making a business out of this and buying distressed properties in an area that might be slightly rough. But I could imagine a lots of appreciation afterwards. So when you were initially in that realm of maybe trying to grow from 10 to 20 to 50 plus units by USC, I can imagine that you probably needed like a larger team. So what did your team look like? Was it just you and your partner, or did you have other folks involved?
It was just my partner and I. Then we started hiring like a bookkeeper. We started hiring accounting people. We started hiring admin and leasing people. And then once we started to get to a certain kind of critical mass, we started actually bringing in third party management. So they started taking like the boots in the ground approach to a lot of the stuff we were doing previously. And they had a full team. So yeah, that's how we scaled it. But like we were really, our focus was finding deals, buying them, and renovating. That was like what we wanted to do. We were doing that nonstop for 6, 7 years.
Got it. And I mean, during that time, there weren't as many platforms to find deals. Were you like door knocking, or how are you actually finding
Yeah,
deals?
you're right. Actually, there was a lot less platform. Student housing itself was a lot less sophisticated, and the information itself was a lot. It was just, the information flow today on real estate is 10x what it was 15 years ago. You just can figure out what things are worth very quickly. You understand the zoning, and everything happens much faster. So we were doing a lot of just door knocking, working with local owners. We started doing development of stuff. We started finding parcels that would fit for, larger scale development. So yeah, it was a lot of like, blocking and tackling out there in terms of acquisitions.
So you put in all this work, you then hand it to a property manager down the line once it makes sense at that level of scale. And then you said you decide to go towards the Midwest, I believe. So at this stage, maybe you have a wider network, maybe you have more information. How do you decide like where in the Midwest? Like,
Two things happened really very close together. One was that the student housing market in general never really collapsed during the GFC. In fact, because a lot of students typically in a recessionary period will go back to school, occupancy and rents stayed basically normal through the GFC. Whereas in market rate multi and single family housing, other types of housing, they really dropped, right? So student was actually really good. In fact, it was so good that what used to be, 100 basis points of spread. So if you bought a student housing deal at a 7 cap, you would buy the same type of deal in the same area at a 6 cap for just market rate multifamily. So that was the spread difference. But because student weathered that GFC so well, that difference basically shrank to zero. And so that operational difficulty of running student housing and the other parts of it, lease up, having these kind of student purpose buildings, all the things that you were getting a return for evaporated and got basically the same level as market rate multi. At the same time, there's obviously real distress in multifamily. And so these two things simultaneously pushed us to say, we've got a good student housing portfolio. We understand how to do this renovation value add strategy very well. It applies to regular market rate multi as well. Let's go try our hand there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense as to, and I love how like in depth, of course you had to be, but how in depth you were of like the space you were playing in, really understanding student housing well, how it compared to other strategies. Then you decide to go towards the Midwest, start to go towards multifamily. How did that change in terms of your approach of finding deals as well as you analyzing them?
So actually, you asked me a question, I missed it, is um, we start pivoting into more market rate multi. And what we decided was where we were seeing the most dislocation was in the Midwest, specifically Texas, Oklahoma, were two states we really focused on. So that was our spinning the globe moment. We liked those states. We had some existing relationships and assets there, so it made for a very easy landing. We had experience in those places, not in multifamily, but we were starting to get know people. And then, unlike student and what we were doing at USC, this became an opportunity to really, lean into um, using broker relationships and just the relationships in those cities to find deals. And what we were finding, at least in the early end of it, so just starting to get out of the GFC, this is now 12, 13, 14, is that a number of deals where you had severe vacancy or dislocation on pricing were mostly people that had traded in from coastal cities, and they had a 10 unit in the Bay Area or Los Angeles or New York or wherever, and they suddenly bought 100, 200, 300 units in much lower priced Oklahoma City or Dallas or other smaller secondary and primary markets. And that sounded great because people were like, this is amazing. I have this like leasing manager, I have all these units, except it takes a different sort of operational oversight. And it takes, in a lot of ways, because you have so much more building, you're going from having 10 units to 100 units or 200 units. You're building, you still have the same, 10 units is basically 10 units everywhere. It's going to be like 5,000 feet, 6,000 feet. Now you have 60,000 feet or 120,000 feet of building. And so when you run into like CapEx or repairs, you need a lot more money, and you need to have the financial wherewithal to suddenly take care of those repairs or do those turns or do something like that. And so those buyers did not have that wherewithal. They had the wherewithal to buy it, but they didn't have strength to stay in it and manage it well. And so that's where we saw tremendous amounts of buyers that were undercapitalized in these markets that had to just sell because they had no choice at that point. And the banks didn't want to take it back. And so we came in and started buying these in mass.
Wow. Yeah, it's really interesting. I never thought about that dislocation. So you hear about all the time when people are building their portfolios on themselves to do 1031 exchanges and scale up. But
Yep.
at some point, as you're scaling and scaling, you need to have more reserves or more capital if the building is larger, like you said, different maybe types of capex as
Yep.
well. So then, because you had these relationships or brokers, is how you were able to kind of step in to kind of solve this problem and acquire
Yep.
the property, correct?
We had relationships with brokers. We were doing a lot of stuff at that time in Oklahoma City, smaller town, everyone knows each other. And so we were able to step into deals and say, we can do this. We know how to do it. We need a bank loan to kind of help us do the construction of these things. And, just one thing that you point out that's really good is that because you're in these bigger buildings, and then when you have these CapEx issues, they actually start compounding a lot faster. So when you have a few units that are down in your 10 unit building, you go and fix those 2 units or 3 units and you get them back up and hopefully rent them. But when you have 5 or 10 units down in your 100 unit building and you start having problems there, it actually very quickly will start affecting other units. Like maybe the plumbing starts leaking into other units. Maybe you have HVAC problems the compounding effect is actually when you're in it, it's easy to see, but you can't see it from afar, especially when you're scaling up a portfolio. And suddenly you'll just have vacancy and you're taking a refrigerator from here to move it over there and try to lease that unit. But now the cost can really become overwhelming for a lot of investors.
I can imagine. And I bet with your expertise and your team that you have a systematized like process in order to be able to circumvent these issues as they arise. So maybe walk me through that a little bit. Like when you acquire this property that's maybe 100 units, it might be in distress. Do you have a crew next day that just, goes and solves everything? Or like, how do you maybe plan out how to bring this back to the.
Yeah. So generally speaking, by the time we get there, a majority of the damage has already been done. This is now 10 years ago. So the units are down, the buildings are in bad shape, there's vacancy. So everything is like, it's only going to get marginally much worse. So we basically assess everything. We make a capital improvement plan, and we will start systematically going through, and we can do as many as like 20, 25 units a month. We generally like to do 10 to 15, and we are going to go in and start redoing everything as quickly as possible. And then have to get into the next step of getting those units occupied again. And so it's a very, especially in the early stages, which I really enjoy. That first 100, 200, 300 days is a really team effort where, your property manager, leasing agent, your maintenance team, everyone is really working very closely together to make this, change happen. And you really need it to happen fairly quickly in order to meet your returns.
Of course, yeah. So you're planning, you're strategizing how to do this in a quick manner.
Very involved.
And then walk me through a little bit of how good life comes about in this transition period that you have from, California now to the Midwest, larger buildings. Tell me how your company now becomes.
So Good Life was really born out of, had done a handful of multi deals, got a deal at USC that I really liked, a capital partner that I'd done some stuff with, larger stuff with, was passed on the deal. And so I went to, I was actually just in Las Vegas for a conference. I ran into a friend of mine, David Fong, and Fong and I started chatting. We had lunch. I said, hey, I got this deal. It's going to be like a 6 cap. This is 2014. And I don't know if it's a great deal. There's a lot of upside. This deal has like, nobody's ever touched the interiors. It's like one of the best locations at the campus, maybe the best. And it just has never been renovated. And it's just because it failed. And so nobody would thought to we should renovate this and get a high rent. So he thought about it, kind of looked at the thing. He said, I think I have somebody. And we ended up getting, this is like 2014, 15. At the time, Asian equity into the US was like a real thing. Like there was a lot of Chinese money from China was coming here for a variety of reasons. It was coming, on an institutional level. It was coming individuals buying like big homes here. And that flow had gotten to be very normal. And so they were looking for opportunity. And at the time, we showed the deal to just a handful of people. And, very quickly, one had, just an interest in USC. They liked the idea of student housing. And very quickly just wrote a check and we were off to the races. So we ended up doing that deal. We did a massive renovation to the 300 bed portfolio of buildings, got the NOI up almost 35% in a year over year, which is unheard of. And we said we should do more of this. And so we stayed kind of at that point on student housing because that's sort of what David knew best. I'd obviously done a lot of, so and it was very attractive to foreign investors. We built a site. We bought a site in Las Vegas. We built that site, 600 bed deal. We did some more stuff in Phoenix. And then we started, again, going back to just basics of, we're just not getting the same return for the nuance of student housing. We should really look at market rate because I think there's just more opportunity in market rate. And so we then started doing a lot more market rate by the time we got into 17, 18.
Nice. So you ultimately were able to help other investors get greater returns
Yep.
based on student housing as well as, like you mentioned, just solid multifamily. And you did mention something interesting that a lot of it was like international funds as well. Have you
Yes.
seen that dry up in the last couple years, or how does that look today?
So I left out a part. So in 2014, 15, 16, there was like a rush of capital, mostly foreign investment from China that was wanting to kind of diversify using US real estate as a means to do that. But by 17, 18, really 18, that had more or less that door had shut. And it shut very quickly. Like it was like it basically, I don't know the politics of it, but it was like we're no longer going to allow Chinese citizens to take massive amounts of capital or Chinese companies and invest in US real estate. Just the money's not leaving the country anymore. It happened very quickly, pretty quietly, and overnight it was gone. And it left us kind of in a weird position. Initially, what we did was we found actually institutional groups in the US that liked what we were doing, were super interested. And so the next rung of like 7, 8 deals were all done with institutional partners. And then we got to a point in 2018, 19, where we had a deal. We loved the deal. Our institutional partner loved the deal. And this was in Dallas. And at the time, Dallas had become a super hot market. And I would say Dallas, for its size, is, in my opinion, the most like liquid apartment market in the world. Like there's no market that has that level of liquidity for especially B 1980s, 1990s apartments because there's a plethora of buyers, there's a plethora of brokers, and there's a plethora of sellers. And it forms essentially, it's almost a perfect market. And because the market is so good, you often had to put up sizable amounts of earnest money, non-refundable, day one, in order to win something. And which was fine because that was what everyone was doing. It was like very commonplace. You put up $500,000, $1 million, whatever the number was, you had to do it if you wanted a deal. And these are all broker deals. There was real upside. The city was going super fast, and it had this really strong, which still has, apartment market. Our deal, which was a great deal, like right in the heart of Arlington, which is where Cowboy Stadium is, and they have this massive Viridian development, and it's got a number of things going on. Great, awesome employment was awarded to us. We put up hard money. Our institutional partner said, "This is great, we're in." And then about 10 days later, they went to committee and they were like, "Well, this happened, that happened, and we can't do the deal." And we were already up like, I think almost $1 million at that point. And we were like, oh my God, like we are really in a very odd spot. We have like a lot of money. That's our money. And we haven't, so we quickly started rushing to all these other institutional partners that we haven't worked with before. They might know us. They've seen the track record, they've whatever, but we hadn't done a deal. And now we were on the clock. And so at that point, what we did was we hooked up with a group that was doing crowdfunding. And he said, I got the guy there was like, I knew him. He's like, I can do this. It's a great deal. Bring it. I will do it. And it was awesome because it was like this group called Realty Shares. We give them the deal. They put it on the platform. And every day you're just watching, for like 3-4 days. It's like every day it's like, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000. And I raised like, I think $6 or $7 million. And so you're just watching. It's like really fun. And you're like, dude, where did all these people come from? It's amazing. And so this is like October of 18, I want to say 18 or 19, 18, I think. And we closed our fundraising. We're overfunded. We've got like a waiting list. So I was like, this is amazing. Why are we not doing this? And we're ready to close the deal. And internally we're like, we've got like this issue, that issue. Instead of closing October 20th, why don't we just push it back to like the 30th, close the end of the month, it's cleaner. And I remember I was like, no, we need to just close this right now. We just need to close this right now. And we end up closing the deal on the 20th. And then my guy at Realty Shares calls me a day after we close. He calls me on Saturday. I'm like, why is he calling me? Because he's just like, this is not like closing dinner we can do later, man. But why are you calling me on Saturday? And he's almost in tears. And he's like, listen, man, I'm glad we closed your deal because our company is going to go bankrupt on Monday. And I was like, holy shit, we would have been destroyed. And just by luck of fate, we ended up closing early. We closed the deal. The company goes bankrupt on Monday, and he's out of a job. But it sucked. But it was one of those stories, just random luck, sort of.
Wow, what a rush.
Yeah, it was
Uh,
crazy. It was insane. Like I was like, why is this guy calling me on Saturday, like during the day? And he's like, yeah, you're so lucky we funded you because by Monday,
yeah,
if we just waited, if we just taken the extra time, we would have made it. They would have pulled everything.
exactly. That's a huge that you made that decision to do it earlier. But
Oh,
also
yeah.
throughout your story, I find it really interesting how you've always kind of stayed tuned with a network, right?
Yeah.
Network of brokers,
Totally.
network of like investors, what other people are doing. I think that's huge for those who are either in the beginning side of investing, just trying to decide where to park your money, or those who are maybe um, 50 units or so trying to scale. Wherever you are in the real estate space, networking is huge. Would you
Yeah,
agree?
100%. This is and will continue to be, especially in commercial real estate, a relationship business. And I think for a lot of people that can be very off-putting because people see that as like, does that mean like good old boys network? Does that mean like it's a boys club or is it a fraternity? Or I mean, I'm using a lot of male terms, but is it like something where you have to um, have this friendly network to get your desired result, to get to what you're looking for? I think that's sort of what you're getting at. And but I sort of look at it like a lot of people look at that and say that's kind of like less savory. That like seems very difficult. And what it really is, and I think what I think really happens is that people want to do business with people they like. If we're gonna go coffee, we should sort of like hanging out with each other. And I think business the same way. But I think more so than even the coffee part of it is that they want to do business with people they trust and that they're certain are going to perform because they trust them. And so that takes away from all the old boy, good boy. It's not that. It's really you've got to be able to trust me because I'm going to be able to trust you. And that's where the relationship part is immensely important.
I
To
agree
differentiate.
100%. Yeah, with the trust and um, how you mentioned, it's not just a boys club that someone may think it is. Like spoke to someone recently who they're doing commercial real estate out in the Midwest, but like North Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
And he said initially that he would call brokers, kind of didn't want to give him time of day because it's like, I don't know you, I can't trust you. But then he set up a meeting where he's like, hey, I have 30 other investors who are interested and like they want to learn
Mm-hmm.
about your business and what types of deals you could bring forward. And he's like,
Mm-hmm.
the broker was like, well, now you're adding value to me. Now I can trust you. And now we can move forward with a relationship.
Makes all the difference. Makes all the difference. I think stories like that are what really truly is how the networks are created. Is understanding what you're bringing to the table and that you're ready to go and perform. Because that's how people start trusting that you will, you know, close something or buy something or sell something, whatever it may be. And that's really where the network really is at its peak performance.
Definitely. And you've walked us through, luckily, like so much of your journey through real estate, different time periods, how it's been affected with capital flowing in and out. And what do you see today? Like, has there been any big shifts in the last year or so, or even for the future with interest rates dropping? Any predictions there?
Yeah. So I think, it's been it transactionally, I think at our peak, we were doing a transaction something like every 8 weeks. So we were selling something, buying something, maybe even six. We were really transactional from like 19 to about 21. We did our last market rate multifamily value add deal in Feb of 22. And so for me, like we did our last deal and interest rates are really climbing in 22. every month they essentially went up 50 basis points. Um, and personally, I went through this real period where I was just like trying to figure out either where's the next dislocation or what's the asset type that is less affected by this interest rate spike. And I didn't find anything. I looked hard. I didn't find anything. So that tells you kind of where things ended up. To your second question, after a couple of years of really trying to figure out that there was probably just coming to the realization that there's a lot less there than we all thought there might be. Maybe it took me longer. I think yesterday's 50 basis point drop is good. I think it shows we're in this interest rate reduction cycle, which is good. I think that people like us, we don't need, interest rates to be at a certain level in order to find good projects. They don't need to be 4% and suddenly all these projects are going to come our way, or they need to be 7% and there's going to be no projects. But what we do need, and this is, I think, the harder part for people, at least where I sit, is I do need interest rate clarity. And I personally don't like the idea that my projects or my business is affected and tethered to something like an interest rate. I don't like that. Maybe it is, but I personally don't like that, because I think that whatever the interest rate is, that is something that I'm just going to have to work with, just like you are, and just like everyone else is. And so I either decide I'm going to work with that or I can't work with that. So I think we're going to start entering a new cycle in this as interest rates reduce, where there's going to be more enthusiasm to buy stuff. And I think the easiest suspect is value add multifamily. I think there is some runway for it. I'm not 100% convinced how long the runway is.
No, I think you make a really good point in terms of interest rates. It's not just about how much, how many deals are available, because truthfully, you could find deals in any type of market. But the enthusiasm and the interest to invest is definitely cyclical by interest rates. But when a lot of people who make their money in real estate, they're not just going with the waves. They're going against them as well. So I think I want to make that clear to the audience too, that you shouldn't just wait on the sidelines and think that all of a sudden a light bulb will come up and this is the golden week to start investing in real estate.
No.
No, it doesn't happen.
We both know that timing the markets is a fool's errand. That's not how you win in this game. But I will say that one thing the interest rate reduction does, very elementary, is that by lowering the return people can have or get from their savings accounts and CDs and treasuries, it starts to increase the interest in alternative investments like real estate. So that is going to be, a punch that's going to happen in the next 30, 60, 900 days. People are going to have more interest in doing it because their returns are starting to decrease now. But we used to be the 4.5%, 5% floor is now coming down, and it's going to keep coming down for some period of time.
Exactly. And then you don't want your money to erode with inflation. So got to put it somewhere.
We've gone through a period where in my lifetime, you've never earned as much money on your money by just doing nothing.
Yeah.
At least I would never have thought in 25 years of having, money in banks and CDs, whatever it is, that we would ever have gotten to a point where you get 5% in this country. I've seen in other countries that have much more volatility, but not here. But we were here. And now we're slowly coming off that, which will create real interest to find investments that return better. So our jobs theoretically become easier.
Yes. Can't wait for that. Well, Rohan, I really appreciate all the information that you've been able to provide. Your background is extensive. You have so much knowledge, and I appreciate you being able to share it. For those that want to be able to follow you and your company, how would they do so?
You can always go to our website, Good Life Housing Partners. We're at goodlifehp.com. And we have a weekly podcast that David and I do, just kind of talking about what we see in the markets, mostly real estate. Occasionally we get some other things. It's been a lot of interest rate talks the last few months, but it's a fun little podcast. We talk about things we're seeing in the market. We end it with kind of like favorite content, upgrades, downgrades, things we're just, musing on, things that are fun. So I actually, oddly enough, a lot of people that listen to it like the end more than the stuff we talk about, but what are you gonna do? This has been great, Ariel. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. If I ever kind of get guests going, you'd be my first.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rohan.
All right, bye.